Hello, this is Professor Binninger, and in this short video lecture, we're going to focus on the topic of sustainability and sustainable development. Each individual has his or her own environmental worldview or set of assumptions and values reflecting how they think the world works and what their role in that world should be. Listed on the screen are three major types of worldviews. The first is a human-centered worldview, with the planetary management worldview holds that people are separate from and in charge of nature and that we can manage the earth mostly for our benefit. The stewardship worldview holds that we can and should manage the earth for our benefit, but that we have an ethical responsibility to be caring and responsible managers. The life-centered worldview focuses on all species have value as participating members of the biosphere, regardless of their potential or actual use to humans. Hence, we have an ethical responsibility to avoid declining biodiversity and threatening the survival of any individual species. The Earth-centered worldview holds that we are part of and dependent on nature, and that nature exists for all species, not just for us. The reason we take a little bit of time to talk about worldviews that people may have is because these worldviews will influence the steps that people may or may not take in order to move towards a sustainable society. This diagram shows some of the cultural shifts that would need to be emphasized to bring about a more sustainable society. So on the left side of the diagram, the current emphasis is listed, and on the right side of the diagram, the more sustainable emphasis is listed. And this is broken into three categories: energy and climate, matter, and life. Under the energy and climate category, if we shifted from fossil fuels to direct and indirect solar energy, we would be approaching a more sustainable society. In the current emphasis, energy is wasted. A sustainable society would focus on energy efficiency, and we are taking steps and strides to be more energy efficient. Simple examples would be purchasing energy efficient appliances. However, we still have a long way to go. We could make more energy efficient lighting or more energy efficient homes in terms of doing energy audits. Current emphasis under energy and climate is climate disruption, and that's based on continuing to emit carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere without having concern of the overall environmental impact on climate change. Sustainable ways of approaching climate is to look towards techniques or methods that could be employed to stabilize the climate and counter impact or counter effect any potential climate change. In the category of matter, the current unsustainable approach is high resource use and the generation of a lot of waste. If you lived in a sustainable society, you would focus on using less resources and generating less waste. And we are moving in that direction in some areas, and you'll learn more about that in the waste section of this course. The current emphasis is that the consumer buys and throws away, and then buys again and throws away. In a sustainable emphasis, the consumer will reduce what they need to buy, they'll reuse what they can, and they'll recycle anything that is able to be recycled. From a waste disposal standpoint, an unsustainable society focuses mainly on waste disposal and pollution control. In other words, end-of-pipe treatment technologies. In a sustainable society, the emphasis is placed on waste prevention and pollution prevention, and we'll talk about some of those in the waste section of this course. In an unsustainable society, people will focus on depleting and degrading natural capital, which has a result of reducing the biodiversity, and population growth continues. In a sustainable society, people focus on protecting natural capital, which again is natural resources and ecosystem services, protecting biodiversity, and stabilizing population. We are moving forward in some of these areas. We had the Endangered Species Act that was passed that protects biodiversity, and we're seeing that there is a decrease in population growth rate occurring in most of the moderate low-income countries as well as high-income countries. This diagram just gives further examples of environmentally sustainable economic development. So take a few minutes to look over this diagram. Obviously, a recycling facility, a facility that allows you to reduce, reuse, and recycle would be beneficial for a sustainable community. Another approach is having bicycling available, as well as alternative forms of energy, including wind turbines or solar. Focusing on water conservation when used for agriculture or watering lawns around people's homes, and doing buy local food and sustainable agriculture. And the list goes on. So there are many different approaches that we can pursue in becoming a more sustainable society. This graphic is just showing change versus time and listing items of change that could help promote us moving to a more sustainable society. So the concerns, trends, tools, and technologies listed under this curve of exponential growth could be part of a major shift towards sustainability. These agents of change are actually happening, but slowly, and at some point, some or all of them could really take off, resulting in a J-shaped curve of exponential growth. This would help bring about a sustainability revolution, perhaps even within our lifetime. So looking at the first category, environmental concerns, having a shift where people focus more on protecting natural capital, sustaining biodiversity, and repairing ecological damage, as well as taking steps to address climate change, would help us move towards a more sustainable society. Social trends, this kind of relates to each of us. Reducing our waste, using less, living more simply, reusing and recycling at home and in the businesses, and then promoting the growth of eco-neighborhoods, which allow commuting to work or to the store easily through public transportation or through some other means that doesn't rely upon single automobiles. Economic tools we've already talked about this semester, this lecture, and they're listed there again. And then technologies that can be employed that can help us move towards sustainability can include pollution prevention, organic farming, and that's already happening, drip irrigation, we are already incorporating that into our agricultural practices for water conservation purposes. Desalinization does happen now here in the US and a couple other places around the world. Focusing on energy efficiency and implementing solar, wind, and geothermal energy as a source of alternative energy that becomes a mainstream energy for us instead of fossil fuels, as well as environmental nanotechnology and eco-industrial parks that foster sustainable businesses. To the right, you see the triple circle diagram that once again brings back home the point that sustainability depends upon decision making that occurs and considers society, economy, and the environment. In this chapter, you read about the Sustainable Development Goals. The Rio Plus 20 meeting was held in 2012, 20 years after the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. This meeting formulated the goals, titled The Future We Want. The Sustainable Development Goals were set and developed for 2030. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, each one has its own target. These goals focus on sustainability in relation to water, waste, cities, climate change, consumption, and ecosystems. One of the largest focus points of these goals is to reduce hunger and poverty and improve healthcare, education, and empower women while moving more towards sustainability. The way that the goals were written, it required that developed countries pledge to donate $7 for every $1,000 of their gross domestic product, or 7%. This donation would go to less developed countries in order to help these less developed countries reach the Sustainable Development Goal and come out of poverty. Only 5 countries, Denmark, Luxembourg, Sweden, Norway, and the Netherlands, have pledged what they promised. The average amount donated in most years has been 0.25% of the national income, which is less than what the goal was set at. The U.S. only gives 0.16% of its national income to help poor countries. Japan, another wealthy country, only gives 0.18%, whereas Sweden is contributing 0.9%. The goal has been set at 7%. So the countries that participated in the Rio Plus 20 meeting haven't stepped up to uphold what was agreed upon at the meeting. Some analysts are alarmed at the widening gap between rich and poor countries and between super rich individuals and the rest of the world. In 2014, a report cited that the richest 85 people in the world have as much wealth as the poorest 3.5 billion people, i.e. half the world's population. So 85 people in the world have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people in the poorer countries. There's definitely a gap and a disparity in wealth distribution around the globe. Some economists say that part of the wealth will trickle down to the poor and the middle class. Others point out that it's been almost 30 years, and instead of trickling down, most wealth has been flowing up to rich individuals, corporations, and countries. So what are some steps that could be taken to help reduce poverty? Well, perhaps implement a massive global effort to combat malnutrition and infectious diseases that kill millions of people prematurely. Provide universal primary school education for all children and for the nearly 800 million illiterate adults. See, education can help pull people out of poverty. Provide assistance to help less developed countries reduce their population growth, mostly by investing in family planning, reducing poverty, and elevating the social and economic status of women. Focus on sharply reducing the total per capita ecological footprints of more developed countries, such as the U.S., and rapidly growing less developed countries such as China and India. Encourage lending agencies to make small loans to poor people who want to increase their income, known as microloans. So there are steps that we can take to help alleviate poverty. It's a matter of coming together and making the choice to do it and then following up on it. As indicated just a few minutes ago, we have Sustainable Development Goals that aim to sharply reduce hunger and poverty. And countries did make a pledge to provide donations of 7%, and we're not yet making that mark. On the left-hand side of this diagram is listed the expenditures per year needed to restore the environment in areas where there's been impact. So for example, to reforest the earth, it would be $6 billion per year. To protect tropical rainforests, $8 billion. To restore the fisheries, $13 billion. To protect biodiversity, $31 billion. To eliminate hunger and malnutrition, $48 billion. So that's what's estimated cost-wise to tackle some of these big problems that have been identified. On the right-hand side is the expenditures per year, primarily focusing on the U.S. The top line is world military. How much is being spent on world military? $1.4 trillion. How about the U.S. military? $734 billion. What about highways? $29 billion. Cosmetics, $8 billion. So, which item on the right side of the figure would you do without or reduce in order to pay for solving some of the environmental problems listed on the left side of the figure? Looking at those values, is there anything that jumps out at you right away? As we wrap up our short video lectures for Chapter 17, I'd like to go over some unsustainable ethics and some sustainable ethics. On this screen are some common beliefs that people may have that lend themselves to living in an unsustainable way. The first one is that people believe the earth is unlimited supply of resources exclusively for our use. That belief allows people to consume more and use more without much regard for the impact of the environment. The second one is that humans and nature are separate and we are immune to the natural laws that govern other species. Well, that is definitely not true. The third one is human success results from subduing and controlling nature, and this too is false. In fact, one of the root causes of our environmental problems is that we continue to try to control nature without knowing enough about it. Sustainable ethics are just the opposite of what we saw on the previous screen. People that take steps to live sustainably have some of the following ethics that they believe. The earth has a limited source of resources and they're not for all of us. Humans are part of nature and we're subject to the laws of nature. Success stems from efforts to cooperate with the forces of nature, and our future depends on a healthy, well-functioning ecosystem. From an environmental ethics standpoint, there's some concepts presented on this slide, such as mimic the ways in which nature sustains itself, protect the Earth's natural capital, repair ecological damage areas, use matter and energy resources efficiently as possible, celebrate and protect biodiversity, and the final one, which I think is pretty important, is leave the Earth in a condition that is as good as what we have enjoyed or better for future generations. On this slide is a list of the top 15 most sustainable cities. Chicago has over 300 green roofs and more LEED certified buildings than any other city in the United States. New York City also has hundreds of LEED certified buildings and green roofs. Just as many people carpool or ride mass transit in New York City as drive in New York City. These are all examples of being sustainable. Sustainability can also be incorporated into your college environment. The Treehouse at Dickinson College is a center for sustainable living where students that have interest in sustainability live and work together to promote sustainability efforts among themselves and throughout the campus. Dickinson College has a unique setup where students are very involved with assessing water quality in the watersheds throughout Pennsylvania. In addition to that, students are also involved with running and operating an organic farm for which the foods are harvested and brought to Dickinson to use in the cafeteria. It's interesting that they're utilizing opportunity for students to make change and difference related to sustainability.